Hello YouTube, I'm Nebutron and today I'm going to talk about Two Distant Strangers, and I do want to give a trigger warning at the top of this episode because I'll be talking about police brutality. Two Distant Strangers is a short film newly released on Netflix, and I'm going to be honest with you, when I saw the trailer for this film, I didn't think I was going to like it, but I felt it was important to give it the benefits of the doubt, and I'm here to tell you that having given this film the benefits of the doubt, I didn't like it. I thought it was bad. In fact, I thought it was so bad, the best thing about it is that it's only 30 odd minutes long. Okay, so I'm going to go through the plot and break it down. So this review is going to contain some spoilers. Now, this is normally where I say, if you want to avoid spoilers, go away, watch the film, but come back here for the review. But you know what? I'm not saying that this time. Two Distant Strangers stars rapper Joey Badass, Andrew Howard and Zaria Simone, and the premise of the film is basically that cartoonist Carter James, played by Joey Badass, wakes up after a night spent at lover Perry's home, played by Zaria Simone. Carter tries to sneak out of the bed without waking Perry, but fails and ends up exchanging some pleasantries with her. But this is kind of odd because later in the film he remarks that he really likes her, but feels like for her it's just the sex, yet still tries to leave in the morning without saying goodbye. Anyway, Carter leaves her home and enters the street. He lights a cigarette and a roll of cash falls out of his backpack. He then accidentally knocks a drink into a passerby, which leads to a few annoyed exchanges before Carter is accosted by police officer Merk, who asks if there's a problem. The officer, portrayed by Andrew Howard, immediately disputes that Carter is smoking a cigarette, decides that merely carrying cash is a problem, and proceeds to try and search his bag on his groundless suspicions. Carter proclaims the nonsensical nature of the situation. He is wrestled to the ground by Officer Merk, then some other cops appear out of nowhere, they pin him to the ground, and Officer Merk proceeds to choke him to death. Carter exclaims in vain, "I can't breathe." Then we cut to the same morning. Carter wakes up in bed with Perry again, and we see he's stuck in a loop. That is basically the entire film. Now, if this is familiar, it's because the whole stuck in a loop concept has been done on numerous occasions, perhaps most famously in Groundhog Day, but the similarities definitely end there. Carter continues to be murdered by Officer Merk regardless of what he does. We see him decide to leave his bag at Perry's, he still gets killed. He takes the cash out of his bag and puts it in his pocket, still killed. When he stays at Perry's for breakfast, a SWAT team storm in and Officer Merk murders him. We get a montage of a black man being killed again and again by the same cop in a really violent manner, and we see Carter start to break down. He wakes up after 99 separate murders or something like that and talks about his predicament with Perry, who suggests talking to Officer Merk. So Carter talks to Merk and wows him with his knowledge of the loop by predicting things just before they happen in order to convince him. Merk is impressed and can't seem to fathom his own racism, but decides to let Carter go. Carter thinks he's scot-free, but just as he turns a corner, he sees some kids running out into the street towards Officer Merk and decides to help, so he's killed again. So the next time, Carter does the talking thing again, but this time he asks if Officer Merk can take him home. So he rides in the back of the police car while they have a kind of heart-to-heart about racism and stuff. They even bond over star signs. It's pretty silly stuff. Merk seems to be a pretty boring average racist who happens to sound a little like Bill Burr. Anyway, Merk takes him home, Carter gets out and starts to head towards his apartment, but just as he walks away, Merk starts to applaud Carter. Carter turns around and Merk reveals that he actually knows all about the loop and has done all along, and that he's going to continue killing Carter. Basically, he's some kind of supernatural psychopath. Carter tries to run and is killed again. Carter wakes up once more, and while speaking with Perry, she asks him if he's going to continue letting Merk kill him forever, to which Carter responds that he's smarter, faster, has more money than Merk, so he'll figure something out and get home to his dog. There the film ends, leaving you to ruminate in your confusion. Now, I've made no secret of the fact that I don't really like this film, but I want to try and talk about why. It makes little sense to me, and while I understand the point, I think it's made clumsily and I think it's really crude social commentary. The narrative mechanism in this film is one of the repeating day, the endless loop that Carter is trapped in. Carter even refers to the over-policing of neighborhoods and how it leads to black people being stuck in cycles they can't break, while having his heart-to-heart with Officer Merk. Director Trayvon Free is nodding to this unbreakable cycle being the reality that black people in America find themselves in, and it seems to some extent The director feels that because of this, it's okay that there is seemingly no reason that we are watching a black man be killed again and again. It seems as if he's saying, that's the point. This is how messed up racism is. And while I understand that sentiment, this is black trauma on screen. This is watching a black man be killed over and over again to make this point. In Groundhog Day, a source of inspiration for this film, Phil Connor's character, depicted by Bill Murray, is a pretty deplorable protagonist. He is not a likable guy. When you learn that he is trapped in the same day, doing an assignment that he hates in a place that he hates, it becomes clear that an external supernatural force is punishing him, and he isn't freed from this scenario until he stops fighting and sincerely and genuinely changes as a person. The entire film ends up being a brilliant story of an ever-developing character. It explores philosophical questions and psychological themes. When Phil is freed from the cycle, he is a truly changed man, so much so that he decides to stay in Punxsutawney, a place he despises at the beginning of the film. Two Distant Strangers, however, ends with Carter having no idea why he's trapped in the loop, but declaring to fight to get back to his dog. But why would Carter getting to his dog even end the loop? Carter has zero agency in this film. Merc seems to be the sole arbiter of Carter's destiny, with what would be serious supernatural powers that are never explored or explained. But I do get it, Two Distant Strangers isn't really about the people in the film. They all serve as empty vessels for the greater point that says nothing here needs to make any sense because of racism, and of course that racism is a terrible thing. But I don't think this provokes any interesting discussions about racism because it's focused too specifically on a psychotic individual with the power to kill the same black man again and again just because he can. The director is trying to communicate the inevitability of confronting racism and the powerlessness in that experience, but his method of exploring this is simply having the audience watch a black man be explicitly killed again and again for 30 minutes in what amounts to little more than gratuitous trauma porn. Now I almost forgot about this, but I've actually seen this film before, and that's because the exact same film was made years ago by Cynthia Cao. In fact, you can go on YouTube right now, well, after this video if you will, and type in Groundhog Day for a Black Man. Cynthia wrote and directed a 4-minute film that has the exact same premise as this one. Now, Cynthia's approach is one of tragic comedy, and it's not above criticism either, but just the use of multiple cops gives a greater sense of an actual system at play rather than a single psychopath who is supposed to personify that system. Cynthia's film also doesn't subject its audience to explicit violence against black bodies for 30 minutes. My issue with Two Distant Strangers isn't that the point it is trying to make isn't accurate, it's that it's crude and ham-fisted in the way it goes about trying to make that point. I have to ask who this film is for, because it's been described as powerful, and while I can only speak for myself, I don't think black people find the idea of watching a black man killed by a racist cop for 30 minutes powerful. I certainly don't. Black people are well aware of the realities of racism without it being used as a cinematic bludgeon. So perhaps this is for white audiences. Well, that's the thing. Racism is pervasive and omnipresent, and it's embedded in our systems. This film tries to highlight that, but it's lost behind an all-powerful psychopathic maniac who is fixated on killing one black man for sport. I think it's far easier to distance yourself from the exaggerated caricature of what racism is as depicted through Officer Merc. This is a man who's literally frothing at the mouth in some scenes where he kills Carter, and at the end of the film where he reveals he's in on the loop seems almost high as he screams it's the best of the bunch before murdering Carter once again. Ultimately, the way this film chooses to make its point seems unnecessary, and the price paid to make it seems too high. I found it to be a disappointment. Two Distant Strangers is a film that presents racism as an inevitable and unescapable supernatural force, but it doesn't try to take a forensic look at it, and instead subjects its audience to watching what amounts to the relentless torture of a black man for 30 minutes. At the end, the film throws up the many names of victims of police brutality, providing a somber reminder of how many lives have been unnecessarily lost. Unfortunately, the best thing about this film is that it doesn't subject you to having to sit through a longer runtime. I give Two Distant Strangers a 1 out of 5. Thank you if you made it to the end. I wasn't really sure if I wanted to review this, but I thought it was important to share my views on depictions of black trauma on screen, because while it's clear we're going to continue having these discussions around racism, it's also clear that trauma sells, and I think it's a discussion worth having when we're talking about racism and how what we see on screen plays into that. What did you think of Two Distant Strangers? Am I too harsh? Do you think it's a powerful take on how damaging racism can be? Let's have a discussion in the comments below. I'm eager to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed the review, give me a like, and if you enjoy my content, don't forget to subscribe. I have more views on the way, but until next time, I'm out.